Dar Jamail, who writes for Truth Out and whose work I deeply, deeply respect, writes that what are referred to as the devastating impacts of climate change are increasing. And he points out what we talked about last week, this massive collapse of an ice sheet in Western Antarctica has begun. And according to scientists, it's unstoppable, and it will cause an inevitable rise in global sea levels of at least 10 feet. Now, that's 100 years from now, or 200, the 10-foot sea level rise. Whoever's still alive on this planet at the time is going to have to deal with something really singularly, in the history of the human race, horrific. But in the meantime, there are other things happening. Dar writes, the rise will be relatively slow at first, but by 2100 will ramp up sharply. And it could happen sooner, warn the scientists, as the impacts of anthropogenic climate disruption continue to intensify. See, that's the only part of the science that is unsettled, is whether or not these increases are arithmetic or geometric. Remember that? You know, does it go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or does it go 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64? In that sort of sequence. So, Thomas Wagner, who runs NASA's programs on polar ice and helped oversee some of the research, said, this is really happening. There's nothing to stop it. Okay, well, NASA, you know, they're the ones that made up the fake moon landing back in 1960, was it 69? Remember that? It was all on a Hollywood soundstage. None of that happened. Anyway, on April 13th, the world's leading scientific body for the assessment of anthropogenic climate disruption, I'm going to call that ACD, meaning simply that it's caused by humans. The world's leading scientific body for the assessment of ACD warned of what it calls a devastating rise of 45 degrees centigrade if we carry on as we are. Now, I don't know why they don't. Why centigrade or Celsius? Why not put it into Fahrenheit so it's even scarier? You know, people say, "Oh, 45 degrees Celsius. Let's see now. What was that? You convert 34 minus. Never mind. I'm going to go watch TV." And according to Mike Childs, the head of science, policy, and research at Friends of the Earth, an increase of 4 degrees centigrade warming would mean, quote, a devastating impact on agriculture and human civilization. Mike Childs added that we would face even more extreme weather events and lose approximately 20 to 30% of the wildlife on the planet. This assessment may even be overly hopeful, given that humans have never lived on a planet that was 3.5 degrees centigrade or higher above the average or the mean temperature prior to the Industrial Revolution. That's more of that sciencey stuff that is just beyond the scope of the sociopaths to not just understand, but even to entertain, to think about. It's just gone. Because, you know, it says in the Bible that God will never destroy the earth the way he did before. You know, he got very pissed off and destroyed the earth once, but he won't do it again. So what's to worry about, right? Now, a report released in April by a joint Australian-U.S. research team states that escalating CO2 emissions now threaten the entire marine food chain, given that more than 90% of the excess CO2 in the atmosphere is absorbed by the oceans. Now, that kind of a carbon sink, I believe it's called, has been one of the reasons why we've gotten away with this for 200 years, 250 years, without any noticeable effects until the last 30 or 40 years, because the oceans continue to absorb. But guess what? That's kind of reached its max point. The extreme temperature duality witnessed across the U.S. this past winter, extremely warm weather for the winter, extremely cold weather for the winter, those kinds of weather patterns are more than likely to become the norm thanks to anthropogenic or ACD. And it was again revealed who the largest CO2 emitters are: China and the United States. Oh, and India. We are the three biggest killers of everything on Earth. And we're not going to stop. China stop? India? The Koch brothers? The United States? Please. And this is why I say, you know, they call me a pessimist. I call myself a realist, whatever. And as Dar Jamail writes, with full steam ahead for the industrial growth society that dominates the planet, got to keep growing. That's capitalism. That's cancer. That's capitalism and cancer. Got to keep growing. If you don't keep growing, you die. Anyway, this dispatch from the assessment reveals another month of dramatic impacts and stunning reports that show starkly how humans are disfiguring all facets of this planet. When was the last time you walked, unless you're a hoarder, when's the last time you walked into your house, totally trashed it, and then decided, you know, I think I'll set my house on fire. So you carefully spread kerosene and gasoline all through the house on top of all that trash, just spread it all around, and maybe put some firecrackers down in there to make it a little bit more fun, and then lit the son of a bitch. When's the last time you did that? Well, of course you never did it. You wouldn't be listening to the program. When's the last time you ever heard of anybody doing that? Well, it may have happened someplace. Somebody who wanted to commit suicide in a real spectacular way that had to do with their illness. But that's what's happening to the entire planet.